Let me go quickly and just what's the context here for today? Uh, One is that import tariffs. We talk of import tariffs. All economists know. Those of who are not economists, it would be good to keep in mind that import tariffs are a tax on exports. Okay, that Econ Trade 101. They are a tax on exports. Okay, South Asia has for long been a tariff outlier, very reluctant liberalizer, and it has perfected the art of para-tariffs, right? This is a peculiar terminology that things that are tariffs in all but name, right? So they're disguised. And the countries of the region, apart from being sort of inhospitable to trade with the rest of the world, they don't like each other too much in terms of trade and investment. So it's a very low levels of trade and investment with each other, right? So this is the context, in some sense, a background which holds irrespective of these new tariffs. So what's happened to the rules of the game after Trump 2.0? Of course, you've all heard there's turmoil in the world trading system. With the US moving to both unilateral and differentiated trade measures, which really negates the basis of most favored nation trade as we know it, the rules-based order since GATT came into being and then followed by WTO. Not only this, now can we show the first slide, my first slide, Jayant? Not only this, the average tariffs in the US are at their highest since 1935. Currently, it is 17.4%, the trade weighted effective tariff as of September 4th, 2025. Okay, so let's move to the first slide. Yeah, okay. All right, so that's the second one. Okay. Okay, this is the average effective tariff rate since, so you can see since levels Smoot-Hawley, these are the kinds of levels that prevail. So what happens as a result of this is we also come up with can we go back to the slides, Chet? That we are also entering a world that is extremely uncertain, right? So this World Uncertainty Index compiled in the US by a bunch of IMF economists and Nicholas Bloom, the uncertainty index is beyond the charts. It has gone up fivefold between August 2024 and August 2025, right? So it's now in excess of 105,000. And we know what happens with uncertainty. It is a truism, but it is absolutely true. Business hates uncertainty. There is no decision making, especially decision making when it comes to investment. Investment becomes very hard to happen. What has been the response of countries to this unprecedented challenge to the world trading order? Is basically there's been no response. That they have not responded in any retaliatory way except for China. Instead, have signed off on deals with the US Trade Administration. So apart from that, what else are they doing? That is much of what today's seminar is about. So you can range of responses can include looking regional, looking to other non-regional partners, accelerating domestic reforms, and so on. So this is what we will talk about. Unfortunately, there don't seem to be any signs yet within South Asia of a looking regional as a result of these, even bilaterally, let alone regionally. Okay. So what's ahead? What's in store for us today? We have an excellent panel, and I will introduce each speaker in turn when they speak. There'll be 8 minutes for each, 10 minutes for each speaker, and I will give them a warning at 8 minutes maybe via phone message. So please keep your phones on next to you. And what are we going to discuss? The overall and sectoral impacts of US tariffs on your country's economy, the policy response so far, any thinking of a new approach to trade and investment, and finally, what are the implications for regional cooperation in South Asia, even though we may not have happened, but what does it mean? So we're going to start with my partner, TG Srinivasan. Both of us have co-founded the Trade Sentinel, and he's going to give a 5-minute overview of a gravity model that CSEP and Trade Sentinel have been working on. It's a very timely, very interesting model, and he will tell you more about it. And TG and I were also colleagues for many, many years in the World Bank as well. So over to you, TG. So this presentation, 5 minutes for you, and then 5 minutes for you at the end on India. Okay, over to you, TG. Do you have control of your slides? If not, we'll do it from here. You're on mute.
Thanks, Sanjay. I'm not able to download the slides. Can you please start the slides? And
Jayant, can you do the South Asia slides, please? Very good. Okay, just let's, I can manipulate it. Right. Okay, go ahead, TG. 5 minutes.
Okay. The US tariff policy has been in a flux since April too. So it's very hard to keep track of it. But luckily, there are institutions which are doing this for us. One is, of course, the PIE. From the point of United States, it has been keeping very good track of this. From the developing country point of view, I think it is best that I have seen is the UNCTAD's evolution of tariff profiles on individual countries as the weeks progress. They have like a cadence of almost every 10 days or so, they are updating the data. What they give is what is the effective tariff rate before the changes and after the 90-day pause. That is what they present. They present it for all the countries in the world for 3 points of time. Before 2025, and then during the initial interim period, then the final after the 90-day pause. Now, what I have taken here is only the 2024, end of 2024, and what it is after the 90-day pause. Of course, the 90-day pause means different things for China too. Now, what we find here is that the steepest increase has been levied on India. Obviously, because of the Russia penalty, it's gone very high. And then, of course, it's still smaller than what China has. And what surprised me here is that already Bangladesh had a high tariff even to begin, like 15%. That's because of the kind of products it exports to United States, particularly the apparel, and they have very high tariffs already there, even before the further increase in tariffs. So this is the tariff rates which South Asia is facing now from the United States. Now, how much South Asia depends upon United States? Let me just warn you that the India figure here may be a little bit too high. I pulled all these numbers from WTI. There could be some issues with the data there. Basically, what I want to say is that India and Sri Lanka depend far more than Pakistan. Bangladesh is about 15%, Nepal is about 10%. Now, what we have to keep in mind is how much is US imports as a share of the world imports. US is only 15%. So if your exposure is more, then you're depending much more. I think the slides jumped, sorry. Can you go back?
Yeah, we're going back, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, can you move to
the next slide? Move to the next slide. Now, the interesting thing is, how we model the import on the exports of South Asia using a gravity model. So I basically followed the Fontaine and all in 2022 paper. They have an estimated gravity model of bilateral flows at HS 6-digit levels. So I basically adopted the parameters from there. I did not estimate this. It's basically from there. What you will find here is the first equation, if you're familiar, is the estimating equation from this model. The first two terms there are the exporter-importer fixed effects. Then you have the bilateral tariffs as a variable. Then you have the distance. Then you have the other control variables like colonial lineage and all the rest of it. Now, see, the important thing is that using this framework and under the underlying CES, the share of each country in a particular product in the US market is given in the second second equation, which appears here. Now, the tariff elasticity, which, sorry, go back, please. Please go back.
I'm not sure I can go back.
Okay, let me just talk about it. It's okay.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, you have 1 more minute, TG.
Okay. Are you asking me to wait?
No, I'm saying you have 1 more minute.
Oh, I have 1 more minute. Okay. Basically, we work out the new share, export market share, using the substitution elasticity, which is derived from the tariff elasticity. We can skip that. So there is a procedure for updating the export market share, which is very simple, which is at the end of this slide. Can you just go to the next slide, please?
Okay, let's focus on this. Yeah.
Let's focus on the results. Now, the general order of the results makes sense to me. India is worst affected because it is facing the highest increase in tariffs. India suffers like $35 billion loss. And then you have Bangladesh like 400 million or so. Rest of them are smaller. Pakistan is 43 million. And so in terms of percentages, you will find that India's loss is about 39% because India was exporting 88 billion before. Now, Nepal and Pakistan are, there was a bit of surprise for me, but they're actually gainers because of the differential rates of country tariff. They can gain, potentially they can gain, but that's what you're saying. So Nepal is going to be the biggest gainer in terms of percentages, and then Pakistan a little bit. Can you just move the next one?
That's it.
Next slide.
That's it.
Okay. Okay.
All right.
Basically, these are the aggregate effects. I just wanted to show, if you have if you give me 1 minute, I want to go back to the slide and show the dashboard. If you don't have, we can skip it.
I'm not sure we have any other slides, TG.
No, in the previous slide, there is a link there, no simulation dashboard.
Okay.
If you can click on that, it will load it.
Yeah. The next one.
No, the next one.
Just go down. Yeah, that one. Click on that. Yeah. It's a very interesting model, but let's see if it loads in time. Okay, here we go. All right.
Okay. So this is something which is available from us for free. I just want to say just 1 second about why this is unique. The other institution which has a similar simulator is the OEC, but they are behind a price wall. And also you can simulate the tariff changes of only one country at a time. And they have blocked everything other than the April 2 scenario. So ours is much more useful. Here you can analyze by a country. For example, you can enter Nepal and then you can see what are the changes. If you have time, you can do that. Otherwise, you can compare countries. That's how I pulled up my chart by comparing the South Asian countries. And then you can analyze by a product. I would encourage you to play with this when you have some time and give us some feedback. Let's move on.
Okay, thank you very much, TG, for these sharing the aggregate effects on and this exciting tariff simulator tool. So let's jump straight into our the 5 country speakers. Of course, one of them is TG itself at the end. But let's start with Bangladesh. My friend Professor Mustafizur Rahman, who's a distinguished fellow at the Center for Policy Dialogue. We've known each other for a long time since I was based in Dhaka. Yes. And he's well known, so I'm not going to, you all have the bios and the announcement and all that. So in the interest of time, I'm just going to go straight to his intervention. Mustafiz, so your 10 minutes starts now. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think in your introductory remarks and TN has also given us some context, very useful. Let me bring the perspective of Bangladesh, which, as you know, is a least developed country. This shock comes at a time when Bangladesh is preparing to graduate out of the group of the LDCs on 24th of November 2026, when there will not be any more preferential market access. Now, this comes at that time. And it was a shock for us in the sense that US remains our single largest export destination with $8.2 billion of export last year. And as Tian rightly mentioned, 90% of it is apparels. Now, although the average tariff in USA on Bangladesh's export is about 15%, as Tian said, although the average general tariff is 3%, used to be 3% in USA. So in any case, our tariffs were very high. Now, on that, we have now been imposed another 20% additional tariff. So it is now 35%. So when we were at 15% average import duty, Bangladesh was paying, in fact, $1,240 million. At the customs point, the tariff was $1,240 billion. On the contrary, on the $2.2 billion that we import, the average tariff is only 3%. And it is about $70 million of duties. Now, so $70 million of duties at our end versus $1,240 million at that end. And now, if we add another 20%, it will be $2,800 million of import duties that the US importers will have to pay if they import from Bangladesh. So obviously, for us, it's really a big shock. And we know that US has been one of the founders of the WTO, and it has played an important role. But the irony is that US has imposed reciprocal tariff on the ground that it is a bilateral trade deficit. But in terms of services, it has a surplus of $240 billion, increased from $70 billion to $240 billion in 2025. So they didn't touch the services where they have surplus. They have touched only the goods trade. But we know that global trade takes place in goods and services. Now, so obviously, ready-made garments is under tremendous pressure. Now, yes, if there is a tariff, additional tariff of 50% of India and China, we are seeing that some of our ready-made garments wallahs, they are happy that some of the these orders are shifting to Bangladesh. But I think that this is very short term, and we shouldn't look at it from that perspective. We should look at it as to how, as you have mentioned, we can deepen our regional cooperation and how we can really develop our own value chains within the region. Bangladesh's export to South Asia, Southeast Asia, and ASEAN is only 12%. So I think that if we talk about BRICS, 21st century and Asian century, then we should. You asked us what should we do? We should deepen our regional cooperation amongst our countries. We should rejuvenate our SAARC. We should go for deepening of SAFTA. I think that we have to forget about whatever we have contentious issues, and we should look at how to have more intra-regional investment. I think transport connectivity, investment connectivity, and trade connectivity, this triangulation can really help us in terms of translating our comparative advantages into competitive advantage. We have now to go aggressively for regional and sub-regional cooperation. The motor vehicle agreement between our 4 countries, BBI and motor vehicle agreement, it was signed in 2015. All the standard operating procedures have been completed, but now we are imposing non-tariff barriers amongst our countries, etc. So I think this should be seen as a wake-up call for us to really deepen our cooperation in several areas. One, of course, I think that in terms of developing the regional supply and value chains through trade facilitation, greater trade facilitation, mutual recognition agreement now is, I think, the wake-up call. The second, I think, is that we should also think about financial cooperation and integration, paperless trade, single window, banking sector cooperation, so that services which are embedded in the trade in goods should also be there on the agenda. The other point, I think, is also that the BRICS should lead the way. India has taken the lead in terms of South-South cooperation and also various initiatives to deepen South-South cooperation. I think banks like AIIB, NDB, which are alternatives to the traditional banks, I think that those could also be can stimulate our inter-regional trade. And also the other point is, you see, the 14th WTO Ministerial Conference is coming in Cameroon in March 2026. I think we should also give a push to rejuvenate WTO. It's the only organization where it's a rule-based trading system. It espouses, and for weaker economies like Bangladesh, a rule-based system is good. You have rightly mentioned that Trump has violated the most favored nation principle. It has violated its own bound tariff rules in the WTO, which it has committed. The WTO dispute settlement body is dysfunctional. So I think that we should give a push at the 14th Ministerial Conference to get the WTO on its footing. I think that is the only organization, I think, where you have one of the very few where you have one country, one vote. So I think that we should get together and try to also first also rejuvenate, try to rejuvenate WTO. The reforms need to be there, but trade has to be fair in order to be free as well. So I think that is also something where India and the BRICS can take the lead. And I think that it's just not our exports to US. You see, the whole global economy will be suffering. I did some simulation with regard to TINA, the SCAP's tool, analytical tool, and it shows that it's just not US consumers. The demand will be decreasing. It's also global economy which will slow down, and exports to not only USA but also to other countries will also suffer. So we should not be happy that additional tariff on Bangladesh is 20%, but on India it is 50%. On China it is higher than Bangladesh. I think we should look at it from a broader context and broader perspective, and we should get together. And I think the global majority of countries, and the southern countries, it is a time that they take the lead. Trump's strategy has been to negotiate bilaterally, and there was a non-disclosure agreement whereby even our experts could not participate. Only 3% could participate. They couldn't discuss even with our own experts. And now we have negotiated that we will reduce our deficit. We will buy 25 Boeings from USA. We will not buy grain from Russia and Ukraine at lower prices, but we'll buy more from USA at higher prices. We'll buy cotton not from China or India, but from USA. So those type of things, in order to reduce the tariffs, we had to agree, so that it was not 50% like India additional tariff, it is 20%. So what is the cost? So I think that the cost of non-cooperation among ourselves should really be a wake-up call for us. That will be my final sentence.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mustafiz. That's exactly on the dot 10 minutes. So thank you for that as well, and for your very interesting suggestion. I'm sure there'll be things coming up in Q&As and in other remarks as well. So let me turn now to Subhashini Abeysinghe, again somebody who I've known for a very long time, Director of Research at Verité, and a very well-known economist on trade and value chains and so on. Again, you will read her CV. So without any further ado, let me hand over to Subhashini for it's the same set of questions that I've posed to all of you. So your 10 minutes now. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can see my slides and hear me. Hear me and see me?
Yes, we can
Okay.
hear you and see see them. Yep.
Okay, right. So I just wanted to, because there'll be non-Sri Lankans in the audience, I just wanted to give a quick snapshot of Sri Lanka's trade with United States before we start, just to give an idea about the exposure. So yes, 25% of Sri Lanka's exports end up in United States, but as a share of GDP, it's only 3% because Sri Lanka is not an export-oriented economy. Our exports share to GDP is around 12 to 13%. So if you contrast it with a country like Vietnam, whose exposed to GDP share is 90%, 25% exposure will be much higher as a percentage of GDP. I'll move on. I just wanted to just show the trade between the two countries. And then I'll just also wanted to show you what are the key products Sri Lanka is exporting to the United States. Just apparel and rubber alone, rubber products alone account for 75% of Sri Lanka's exports to the United States, and this just 10 product sectors account for 88%. So it's heavily concentrated towards apparel. And to move on quickly, I also want to see this chart is just to show that the level of pain will vary depending on the reliance of the product sectors on the US market. You could see certain sectors like iron and steel or apparel, there is very higher reliance on the US market. In contrast, tea exports from Sri Lanka, for example, has very low reliance on US market. And if you zoom in further, even if you say apparel is 40%, if you zoom further, you could see actually certain product sectors in the apparel is far more dependent on the United States than others. If you take this top product, women's or girls' night dresses and pajamas, I mean, of the total exports, 86% ends up in the United States. And for sectors like this could both act as a plus and a minus. Plus is if this is a very unique relationship, maybe it will withstand the shocks. But if this is if the buyers can easily replace the sourcing destination, then the impact of these tariffs can be much more painful for sectors like this. So the next point I want to make is this idea that if Sri Lanka somehow gets a lower tariff than others, will we be able to export more to United States? So the fact that India and China is facing higher tariffs, will this at least in the short term will bring benefit to Sri Lanka? So what I just wanted to show is Sri Lanka's past performance doesn't give a lot of hope. Even if Sri Lanka's tariffs are lower, whether it will translate into increased exports to the United States. I'm just showing these two charts that to give you an indication of Sri Lanka's past performance in apparel. Shifting sourcing away from China in apparel took place even before Trump's first term tariffs, because China was becoming a more expensive destination to produce apparel. And you could see Sri Lanka didn't significantly gain from that earlier shift. And after 2018, we know it accelerated the shift away from China. But again, Sri Lanka was not a beneficiary. So Sri Lanka is definitely does not have a huge competitive advantage in apparel, despite apparel accounting for 40% of its exports. And this is this is just to show the 90-day tariff pause. We know during this time there was acceleration of imports into United States. There was stockpiling taking place. People wanted to import as much as possible during this low tariff regime. And you can see actually there were a lot of other Asian countries that benefited from it. And so the imports from their countries increased during the 90-day pause. But if you look at Sri Lanka, it's 5%, and our rate, if you compare with previous growth rates, this is just the imports between April and July each year. If you compare, Sri Lanka is just growing at the same rate it has grown, whereas other countries like Malaysia, Bangladesh, Vietnam, Indonesia, and others have seen their imports surge during this 90-day pause compared to the same period the year before. So just to understand the shock, Sri Lanka's tariffs went from 44% to 30% to now to 20%. There is a sigh of relief because the idea is our 20% is comparable to most of our competitors. But that doesn't mean this. There are multiple other ways Sri Lanka will face its shock, right? Face the shock of these tariffs. Like other speakers said, it's a decline in US demand. And what is also increasingly the countries like Sri Lanka, which are higher cost manufacturing destinations, especially in sectors like apparel, find it very difficult to manage this increase in downward pressure on prices, especially about this discussion on who will absorb the tariff. And most of the buyers will try very hard to push as much as possible onto the suppliers than to the consumers. And if you take the suppliers, obviously the countries with lower costs might be able to absorb that pressure, whereas countries with high costs like Sri Lanka will struggle. And like the previous speaker said, there is not just the slowing of world growth, economic growth that takes place because of this uncertainty and these policy changes, but there is going to be increased competition in other export markets. We may feel happy to say, oh, India and China is now the competition from India and China is lower in the US market, but competition from India and China will increase in other markets, because they will now try to find other export markets, and that is going to be a problem as well. And like Sanjay said, the uncertainty has not ended. August tariffs did not bring certainty or predictability to the world trading system. There is continuing uncertainty that is going to affect buyers' decisions, investment decisions, and most of them will really do the bare minimum at a time of high levels of unpredictability, which means you won't be able to expect a lot of growth to come, a lot of investments to flow in during this period. And about the August 1st tariffs and what were the impacts, I think the Dr. Abeysinghe Vijayasinghe from IPS had done a general equilibrium model where he predicted, I think this was, however, before India was, India's 50% tariff came into existence. This is basically, there was already an expectation about 12% decline in apparel, according to his estimates, and about 40% decline in rubber products. So which means for a country that is slowly recovering from an unprecedented economic crisis, whose economy is still in a fragile condition, this is not a great place to be. So what is our response? I agree with a lot of others that discussed. So ideally, our response should be, Sanjay and I have worked on these things quite a lot. Sri Lanka has very high domestic barriers to trade and investment. This is both tariffs that Sri Lankan government imposes, plus a lot of non-tariff barriers, lack of automation, manual processes, archaic regulations, and these have hindered trade and investment for a long time, and this is a problem Sri Lanka has recognized but slow to address. And this is a time where Sri Lanka has to double down, and the experience of South Asia has always been, we do not proactively reform, we reactively reform. If we proactively reform, we could avoid crisis, but we only reform once we are in a crisis as a solution to the crisis, which is unfortunate. But then in that sense, maybe a crisis is an opportunity for South Asians who are reluctant to reform otherwise. So pivot to Asia, yes, Sri Lanka boasts quite a lot of its strategic location, but in Asia, but unfortunately, Sri Lanka's exports have been over-dependent on Western markets for too long. Again, a problem long identified, but very little action taken to diversify exports. We've been negotiating a comprehensive agreement with India for 20 years, with China for 10 years, and Sri Lanka has been very reluctant to enter into trade agreements. So maybe it is time to rethink this approach. So I'll stop there. I hope I've managed within the time you've given, Sanjay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, this is perfect. I mean, I've never had such a great set of 10 minutes on the dot. Fantastic. Uh, so now hope, Vaqar, you're going to have a hard act to follow there. Two speakers who have kept their time, but I'm sure you are known to be very disciplined. I'm so counting on you to also. So Vaqar, again, old friend, former civil servant, he's written books on economics. He's an award-winning economist, and he used to be, when I used to know him, he was in SDPI in Islamabad, but he's now moved on to the International Civil Service. Anyway, again, lots more you can read in the notes, in the announcement. So, Vaqar, great to see you, and over to you for your 10 minutes.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for the opportunity. And I think yours is probably the only effort that I can think of that has really brought the region together to discuss this as a whole. So really appreciate this. I think given that the two esteemed panelists have shown us the new trade reality quite in a very well articulated manner. So I won't go into that introduction. For Pakistan, as indeed for much of South Asia, our dependence remains on a narrow export base and limited markets. And this has become a strategic vulnerability. And the recent, of course, the tariff hikes are, they of course remain a challenge. One hopes that they will not be creating a domino from other trading partners as well in the West. The impact, of course, has been documented in various studies by local authors, local researchers. US is Pakistan's largest single country export destination. And those exports have been dominated by textiles. Exports were between 5 to 6 billion in 2024, 2025. And of course, this figure includes 93%, which is value added. So it's very important for us, given that we are really sort of on the edge of that sophistication ladder where we are trying to climb slowly over the value-added curve. Now, the new tariff regime, of course, means that if you take top 100 export items, the average tariff jumps from 8% to almost 27%. So things like knitted garments could now face up to 38%, woven garments up to 44%. Rice exports, our surgical instruments, are also some exports which are getting affected due to this. Now, of course, while people have to adjust to this, as exporters would tell us, there are cash flow disruptions which have already started, including delayed order or delayed payments on either side. And as the two esteemed panelists have shown, this is not unique to Pakistan only, given that other two economies are also faced with this. So I'll quickly jump to the response. I think the strategy or the response has to be multi-pronged. We started off by really looking at our tariff policy first, given that the US invited for a trade deal. And of course, our delegation went over to DC to discuss this trade deal. So there were some gains in this trade diplomacy as well, given that average tariff came down from 29% to somewhere between 19 to 20%. So trade diplomacy worked to some extent, but this also gave us the opportunity to really think decisively and really question ourselves that years of high tariffs may not have done well. And of course, we had been reading this in textbook economics. This was our chance to look at it more closely. So what we have done is that we now have embarked on a new national tariff policy, which marks a major shift in approaching or transitioning from using import tariffs primarily from revenue collection to employing them as a strategic trade policy instrument. And we informed this to the American counterparts as well. The national tariff policy also aims to abolish most of the regulatory duties, additional customs duties through the SROs, as we call them, and particularly for the US, given that this was a US-Pakistan parley which was taking place. And the policy also reviewed the comparable economies tariffs, including on similar export basket of other countries. We have set targets in the policy to achieve simple average tariff of around 9% by the terminal year 2030. And between that, there'll be reductions going forward. The customs duty slabs would be readjusted downwards. There'll be reduction in maximum customs duty, elimination of additional customs duty. And we hope that given that this national tariff policy comes after a detailed public-private dialogue, so private sector would also welcome this, take opportunity from this to really adjust going forward. Now, the important thing is that we need to refrain from sector-specific policies. Many of them sort of go the cherry-picking way. We don't want to do this if we have a tariff policy which cuts across the sectors. So we have been mulling. We've been thinking around a green industrial policy. We have an auto policy. So we have to align all those sector policies with this national tariff policy, which hopefully addresses some of the concerns which US and partners had with Pakistan. Now, apart from this, as I said, there remains room for diplomacy here. But then, of course, regulatory compliance. Pakistan, like many other developing countries, may have lagged behind in some of the regulatory compliance. So exporters also need to pull up their socks and really comply with the standards so that their markets within the US or the larger trade blocs can expand. We've also had discussions around dovetailing the new industrial policy with the trade policy, wherein cost competitiveness would be a major component. So we are looking at energy costs and logistics and how government can support exporters or key export sectors and bringing both of these costs downwards. There is, of course, room, as Dr. Mustafizur also said, for regional cooperation here. And I think this is where our solid sort of efforts on the platforms of UNCTAD, WTO could bear fruit, particularly the proceedings from webinars such as these, as hosted by yourself, Sanjay, could really help. So recommendations coming from a coalition of experts rather than individual countries. And of course, we also need to look at our own NTBs within the region, about which, of course, we have been talking at length for so many years, you know. So I'll probably stop over here. Once again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Vaqar, for those wise thoughts and also finishing ahead of time. So this is brilliant. I'm on a roll here. So we have the second last speaker, Paras Kharel, who's the well-known to all South Asia hands. He's the head of SAWTEE, distinguished, most distinguished think tank in Kathmandu. Again, our commiserations and prayers, Paras, for the events that are taking place and hoping peace will prevail soon. So over to you, Paras, for your thoughts. I know you've been working for long on all these issues from Nepal's side, and you are yourself a well-known trade expert. So over to you, Paras Kharel.
Thank you, Sanjay, and hope I'm audible. So
Yes.
Like Bangladesh, Nepal is also on the verge of graduating from the least developed country category, which will happen next year around November. And in the case of LDC graduation, the major adverse shock to our exports will come not from our exports to the US, but from other countries. For example, our exports to the European Union or the United Kingdom, for example, or to some extent China, because of the structure of our exports to the US, where, for example, apparels attract most favored nation tariffs, and apparels are not, given trade preferences for LDCs, and partly because about 2/3 of the value of Nepal's goods exports to the US are subject to MFN zero tariffs, that is pre-Trump tariffs, all right? So in that case, LDC graduation as such wouldn't have had much of an effect on our exports to the US, but this shock, this new tariff shock from the US, changes things a bit. Now, the US is Nepal's second largest export destination after India. So our exports to India are about 70% of our total exports, and then comes the US, absorbing about 10 or 11% of our exports. So this is an important market from the export diversification perspective, which has long been Nepal's aspiration. And our total exports to the US are, by South Asian standards, a meager 121 million US dollars. But still a major market from the export diversification perspective. And our weighted average tariffs faced by Nepali exports to the US, by my calculation, was about 1.2%, and the simple average tariff was about 4%. Now we have to add a 10%, blanket tariff on the existing tariffs faced by Nepal in the US. And why we have only a 10% tariff? It's because in the year 2024, was data the Trump administration used to be plugged into its tariff formula would have indicated a negative tariff for Nepal. And since that's not possible, they have used a threshold of 10%. And now using the TINA's SCAP's TINA's partial equilibrium model, I had found that a 10% tariff on Nepal would reduce exports to the US by about 9%. But then in international trade, we know that relative prices matter. And I haven't done this calculation myself, but using the results of a CG modeling exercise done by Dr. Asanka Wijasinghe from the Institute of Policy Studies of Sri Lanka, in whose paper I also saw some results for Nepal. Nepal's exports to the US, after accounting for the most recent tariffs, whereby Nepal has a distinct tariff advantage, would increase by about 33%. Exports to US would increase by 33%, and that is close to the figure of 39% shown by TG, using a slightly different approach. And carpets, apparels, and agri products like dog chew, cat and dog food are major products exported by Nepal to the US. So initially there was euphoria of sorts, among the private sector just after the Liberation Day 2nd April tariffs, and then uncertainty prevailed after the 90-day pause. And then there was a resurgence of hopefulness of sorts as an element of certainty was restored because after the July end or August 1st decision by the US, it looked like a certain tariff advantage is going to be here to stay, although the matter is still is sub judice in the Supreme Court in the US. Now, it does not appear on the basis of my consultations with the private sector that so far, even with the 10% tariffs imposed on all South Asian countries, there were significant cancellations of orders or asking them to reduce prices, right? But we are in the process of checking that through a survey. Now, these stakeholders are looking forward. They say that they are receiving inquiries mostly from Indian producers and exporters, and to some extent from China and Bangladesh also, especially in the garment sector and carpet sector. And some would-be potential investors are inquiring with regard to almost exclusive FDI or FDI with local partnership. And then at the same time, some, for example, Indian producers or exporters have been, saying to Nepali counterparts that, well, we have so much of unsold stocks with us, for example, carpet or garment, And so that's one aspect. And one important aspect with regard to the exports to the US is that the Nepal significantly or potentially benefited from the generalized system of preferences, zero tariffs. Now, they have been in suspension since the end of 2020, and there was a hope that it would be restored because they have been restored retrospectively, the GSP in the past, even after the US suspended. But now, given the trade policy regime or climate in the US, it's unlikely that GSP will be extended. And that carries an impact on Nepal. And the second point is that Nepal has also received additional preferences in the wake of the 2015 earthquake suffered by Nepal, provided by the US in the form of Nepal Trade Preference Program, which provides zero duty to about 77 products. Now that preferences will end in end of 2025. And given the climate in the US, it's unlikely that those preferences will be extended, because extending those Nepal-specific preferences would mean taking that matter to Congress. And I doubt President Trump, in his current mindset, is going to walk out on a limb to the Congress seeking preferences for Nepal. So that's an impact that's generally not discussed, but which is important. So what has the government been doing so far? As far as I know, it is meeting stakeholders, private sector, asking them about the prospects that they see and which investors, if at all, from which countries are approaching them. It has also issued a revised, improved directive concerning rules of origin or certificate of origin to the relevant private sector bodies with a view to prevent a possible trade deflection that might occur, especially given Nepal's long and porous and open border with India. Right, that's one point. And it is also making attempts to strengthen the mechanism to prevent such trade deflection, including by a measure that I just mentioned. That's one point. And the government also sees this as an opportunity to, really possibly reverse the deindustrialization Nepal has seen over the last 20 years, especially after the phase out of the quotas, which resulted in a drastic fall in exports to the US, led by a drastic fall in exports of garments to the US. And mind you, just barely 12 or 13% of Nepal's export potential in goods to the US have been utilized. So there is some potential there. But at the same time, the flip side is that it's not only cost that matters, it's also reliability, timeliness in delivery, and flexibility. And even on cost, a few years ago, the Garment Association of Nepal had done a study which had shown that Nepal's garment industry had at least a 20% cost disadvantage vis-a-vis Bangladeshi producers. In that case, that cost disadvantage would only be partly offset by the seeming tariff advantage we have with the Bangladesh. So there are other factors, even within the cost dimension, that need to be addressed. It's not that easy to increase exports by taking advantage of the tariff differential. Thank you for the heads up. And one crucial point that is rarely discussed is that if Trump had been inaugurated in January 2024 rather than January 2025, then you would have used the 2023 export and import data with regard to Nepal. And if he had plugged in that data, we would have been slapped a tariff of 25%. But I plugged that into their formula, which means that going forward, if we are able to utilize this tariff differential and increase our exports, and that's not a very unrealistic possibility, the fact remains that we may soon have an export surplus, a trade surplus. In that case, there is a possibility that that surplus might ironically, or rather perversely, further trigger a higher tariff. So in that case, trade, diversification is crucial. And here, deepening ties with other South Asian countries is potential. There is potential, but unfortunately, cooperation in South Asia has stalled, and para-tariff barriers and non-tariff barriers are crucial impediments to Nepal's, for example, expansion of exports and trade ties with, for example, India and Bangladesh. Now, one ray of hope is that Trump's tariffs have given a hint of Sino-Indian rapprochement, in my view. And that Sino-Indian rapprochement might have a bearing on India's, or the tone or tenor of India's ties with the rest of South Asia. And that might speed up some things on the South Asian regional or sub-regional cooperation. That is the hope. And if I have time later, I will expand on this South Asian cooperation aspect. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paras, and all very good points, and the very interesting one you said about your success can be lead to your becoming a victim very quickly. So we have completed the 4 countries. Now back to TG, and so given that he had time earlier, so I have restricted him to please 5 minutes only. TG, so give us the highlights of the model and impacts and so on. So Jayant will go to the second presentation of TG, and TG, your 5 minutes now.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sanjay. Thanks, Sanjay. Can you load the first slide, please? Now. Yeah.
So this is for India.
Yeah, next one, please. Next slide. So here I'd like to first discuss what is the relative tariff on India with respect to the competitors as we see it. Now I have picked the competitors here from one of our competitive studies on India's manufacturing. Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia were the peers we were comparing all the time. So here, when we compare India to the Asian competitors, you will find that the tariff faced by India is much higher. Already India had a competitiveness problem according to our work, and this is going to only aggravate that problem. Next one. Now, when we look at the impact on the exports of India and its competitors to the US market, what we find is that, very interestingly, what India lost, Vietnam gains almost $35 billion is India's loss. That's the same thing as Vietnam gains. And basically, in this list of competitors, only Malaysia and Vietnam seem to gain a little bit, but Thailand and Indonesia lose out as well. Now, I just want to point out that India does not gain even in a single product in the 5,600 or so HS6 products, and then it's a loser in almost all the products. Next one. Now, I wanted to look at the top 10 products where India is losing to see whether it makes sense. Now, you will find that India loses most in diamonds and gems and jewelry, and those kind of products, and some in oil. Can you scroll down? Is it possible to scroll down or no?
Yeah, there's a more slide. Next slide.
Oh, it's a next slide. Okay.
Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah.
Yeah, and there we find that in the list of the top 10 losers, you begin to get some electrical products and then cement. And forget these low value transactions. These are basically, I think, the de minimis. Then some kitchen linen, toilet and kitchen linen, etc. Now, what we learned from this is that India's loss is quite substantive. $35 billion is not a small loss in principle compared to the previous exports of 88 billion or so. Next one. Now, how is the market reacting to this severe shock on India's exports to the United States? The first place to look at, of course, is the exchange rate. And if you look at this chart of the rupee versus the US dollar, since April, when the liberation, the so-called liberation, the tariffs were announced, you see that the rupee has been depreciating almost steadily. I find that it's about 3.5% in the last 5 months. Usually, Indian rupee depreciates between 2 and 3%, given the differentials in inflation. So one of the ways in which the market is reacting is the depreciation of the rupee. Given that some other South Asian countries are pretty much linked to the Indian rupee, like the Nepali and the Bhutanese neutral, so there is some respite coming from the exchange rate for the exporters. Next. Before I discuss the strategies, I'm in agreement with all the speakers so far. And the financial markets in India, other than exchange rate market, seem to be taking it in their stride. They never performed extremely well, but they seem to be taking it in stride. Again, because as Subhashini has been saying, that India is not that export oriented. Therefore, it may not affect so much the general market performance. Now, Indian rupee has had some unfortunate real appreciation in the past. Probably this is going to help us correct the Indian rupee so that the central bank should allow the rupee to depreciate in line with the market pressures. Then the other point I would like to make is that the India is probably slightly more concentrated on the US market. It's time to shift the focus to other markets, particularly to Asia. Some of the work that we have done in CSEP with our colleague Byrne shows that there are areas where India is definitely under-exporting, including China and Asia. And the other point which you all made is that this disruption is very important for us to get the act together in South Asia. How can we forge the deeper value chain links so that likely tariff countries like Nepal or Bhutan can offer us some kind of a vent from this pressure from US. The another thing that we can do is that we can fast track deeper FTAs with countries, which includes, of course, USA and Asian countries. Beyond all of that, our work also shows that the competitiveness of India is lagging vastly behind the Asian peers. So we have to continuously work on improving the competitiveness. There are very clear, directions which are coming from our other paper. I don't want to go into that now, but these are the general directions in which India should be working. This is a great opportunity for India to re-engineer its processes so that excess reliance on one country can be cut in the future negotiation. India still should be counting on US as it's a major market. US market is the most dynamic in the world. It is the most innovative.
Okay, thanks. Thank you. All right. Sorry to cut in, but yeah. Thank you so much. That was a very nice note to round us up on, and so there will be lots of questions. So let me start. There are a large number of folks online, so we'll start taking questions from them in a bit. But first, let me open up to the room here in CSEP. So I see Shishir. I would like to ask Probir to comment. He's an old South Asia hand and friends of all of those who've spoken. So while you're all collecting your thoughts, let me start with Shishir and then Probir. Yeah.
Thanks, Sanjay, for the initiative. Fascinating discussion. Just one quick question. I don't know, general question. Uncertainty because of Trump has increased, as you showed, and everyone is responding to it. I'm just wondering, Trump is not immortal, right? So what does the room feel about this uncertainty beyond Trump? In other words, what I'm asking is, to what extent is the US trade policy in particular dependent on Trump versus a shift in stance that the US has, or the policy stance? Thanks.
Thank you, Shishir. Probir?
Yeah, thank you very much. The pleasure listening to all of my friends. Thank you for such a nice discussion, organizing such a nice discussion. It's very timely. Now, if I go through their 5 presentations, 2 points are coming very common to all of them. Diversification and regional cooperation and integration. Diversification is a bit tough because, it requires lots of changes in the government policies. Except India, the rest of the 4 countries, they can do very quick things, knee-jerk, but It's difficult for India to do any kind of diversification quickly. Now, coming to the regional cooperation integration, for which I think Sentinel, CSEP are very well known, and your contribution, that does it mean that we will go back to the SARC, for which we have a whole lot of institutions already built up, and this kind of shocks or disruptions are very common in the SARC. It goes hand in hand, like one of your writings, the stock market prices. It goes up, down. So it's like a snake and ladder story. So I would be posing questions to all of them, and also to TG and to everybody, that if it is a regional cooperation, are you going back to the old SARC ways? How do you explain the current dispensation in the political fronts? This is one. Second is, if we leave aside SARC, why not we go the one which is India, and many of them are very much forward-looking with Bay of Bengal initiatives and looking at the East. So these are my quick observations. But just a questions to the TG and also to Professor Mustafizur. I mean, Professor Mustafizur, when he was delivering his speeches, he was referring TN, right? He was not using the word TG. The reason is, I know he was referring TN Srinivasan.
Yes.
With whom he was very much closely associated in the contribution of so many things. So the questions to TG, that does depreciation here, which he said, very much will help us, particularly India's simulation of the India specific, in terms of, raising India's export profile. So that's, my observations. Thank you.
Sanjay.
Thank you. Yeah, Rajesh.
Yeah, it's very nice virtual meeting with many of my friends too. Rajesh Chadda this side. I think one of the things that Prabir has said, I would like to re-emphasize that. He was referring to SARC, but if we can think once again integrating into SAFTA and start discussions despite whatever differences there are across countries, it is one of the important chances that probably we should not be missing as South Asia, the least integrated regional grouping in the world. That's point number one. Point number two, I think there was a reference to WTO, and I would like to emphasize here that even though countries are going to, I think India has also gone to WTO for some copper related tariffs from the US, but it is high time that we should move back to the discussions to Geneva. Otherwise, it is going to be a long repenting time that the multilateralism is dead. And we know that even if we go there, the appellate tribunal is not working. So it's a question to Vaqar, it is a question to all of us, and to my friend Mustafizur too. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, everyone. I wanted to ask that all of us have been talking about diversification so much. So, is it really realistic to think that India and other countries also can simply shift away from USA, a premium market with high profit margins, to Asian markets and African markets where it's actually so much more tougher and margins are also lower? And on top of it, the competition from China is also huge. So just wanted to get some insights on that.
Sure. Good question. Yeah. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I'm Rahini. I'm from the British High Commission. So potentially an opportunity for TG to go back to his presentation. I saw that the FTAs were listed there as a possible option in response to the tariffs. So the UK has just signed a deal with India, as many people know. I think it's 0% liberalisation on tariffs into the UK as soon as it's entered into force, which will take some time. It'll take about a year yet. But I suppose my question is, one, are you seeing a greater interest from the government of India in different free trade agreement negotiations that have been going on for a long, long time, say the EU, maybe Australia Part 2, could Canada start up again? So that's question one. Are we actually seeing that uptick and kind of policy pivot, I suppose? And number two is, do you think businesses are ready to utilize deals? Or is there more work for government of India to do to work with textile exporters to be able to diversify away from the US and to the UK, for example, in about a year's time?
Okay, thank you, Rohini. Sure, I guess what we're moving towards is all questions in one go. Go ahead, Renu. Yeah.
This is just about this trade diversification. The point is, every country in the world is responding that way. And so, well, as we see it, it's a competitive race to the bottom. And it's a non-starter. And what India was doing in its negotiations with the US was primarily asking for trying to negotiate a tariff rate which was lower or have relative advantage over its peers, which was the sound thing to do. So it's not really going to work anyway, I think.
Okay, so there's an online question. There are two online questions. By the way, all the speakers, please keep noting these questions because some of them might come to you. There's from Sara Javed from Pakistan. She has two questions. One is that given the minimal intra-regional trade in South Asia and so many tariff and non-tariff barriers, what are the top 2 or 3 things needed in SAARC's trade architecture to make it stronger, especially given the rising protectionism in the West? And the second question is what about the intra-regional stability, intra-regional instability in South Asia? Will that continue to be a big obstacle between countries in the South Asian region? Or can trade now, especially given the kind of mini crisis, is there scope for trade to act as a stabilizing force in the region? Okay. So there are a whole bunch of questions there. So I'm going to also, given I don't see any other hands raised here, so I'm going to ask each speaker to take up whichever questions they wish to, and also do a kind of a summary of whatever their last thoughts, as it were, on the issue before we conclude. But I think there is still time. We have about 15 minutes, so I can give you, each of you, 3-4 minutes to respond to whichever ones you think are relevant for you and you can answer. And then in case some questions are not answered, I might pick on somebody or try to answer it myself. Okay, so why don't I start now with in kind of backward order. Let's start with you, TG.
Thanks, Sanjay. Let me quickly try to remember what are the points that I can respond on. First, I would like to say exchange rate as a tool should not be disregarded. Now, it's not that you can manipulate the exchange rate, at least let the markets dictate the direction of the exchange rate changes. India's exchange rate per our calculations some time ago is that real exchange rate is appreciated. It's putting a burden on Indian exporters already. Part of the reason is the surplus India runs on the software exports, and also it is putting a burden on the rest of the manufacturing sector, the goods sector. So, as for all the panelists, I would say, how far do you see the exchange rate playing a role in our region, in partly correcting for the maniacal, tariff rates coming from the U.S. Then, as far as the whether India is fast tracking its FTAs, I don't have a personal ear to the Indian government, but what I get a sense is that instead of just opening up more and more simple free trade agreements, which are like a low-hanging fruits, India should start doing more deeper FTAs. I think there seems to be also a response not only on the trade side, also liberalizing the internal market. I think Sanjay mentioned also some time ago, like the GST reforms is probably kickstarted by the external pressures that India is playing. I would like to say that trying to cut a deal with US is not the approach I would like any of our countries to take. If you're cutting a deal with the US on some particular thing, we know from trade theory that such things should be extended to all. Of course, you go and cut a deal, but extend it to everybody else too. No, that should be the approach we should have. We should think this is a 3-year problem we are going to face. Even the next administration may not easily walk away from all this protection because of the attraction of the tariff revenues and the difficulties the US is facing in terms of the overall debt and the perceived threat from China. So it's unlikely to walk away from this. We have to live with this and adjust to this changing scenario. Now, the other thing I would like to say is how exactly we move towards diversification into other markets. Is the free trade is one tool for that, and the traditional tools have been tried for a very long time. They don't work. The free trade tool has to be tried. And right now, the governments don't even know whether the free trade agreements work because the data doesn't say how much is actually traded under free trade preferences. So I would stop there and come back if you like, Sanjay, if you have the time.
Sure. Thank you, TG, for that. Let me ask Paras if you have any sort of thoughts to answer any of the questions and then concluding thoughts from your side.
Okay. Thank you, Sanjay. So on depreciation, ours is a fixed exchange rate pegged to the Indian rupees. And when the Indian or if the Indian rupees depreciates, so does the Nepali rupee. So that might provide an additional source of competitiveness when exporting to third country markets. That's just one point. And the second point is that diversification for Nepal in the context of US tariffs is different from diversification for India or Bangladesh or Pakistan. In the case of Nepal, we are already too dependent on India for our exports. Our 70% of our exports go to India. And through actually significant efforts over the last 50, 60 years, we have been able to diversify our export destinations, and being dependent on a single country is never healthy. And plus the fact that Nepal has been under blockade at least 4 times from India, that has also propelled Nepali governments over the years to try to diversify the export basket. And the tariff shocks from the US, which imparts a kind of a tariff advantage for Nepal, is seen as an opportunity to diversify away further. So we need to use this tariff differential if we can, and in the process also enact or implement reforms, for example, on the trade facilitation front to reduce trade costs. And on SAWTEE, I think for all the criticisms we make of SAWTEE is a most tangible document or outcome or agreement that we have under SAWTEE. And it has long sensitive lists, but some trade is happening through it. Actually, a significant amount of trade between Nepal and India, particularly imports from India into Nepal, is under the aegis of SAWTEE. And I think this is possibly a propitious moment to revive, SAWTEE negotiations, particularly in terms of addressing non-tariff measures and non-tariff barriers, as well as para-tariff barriers, which have not been addressed under a bilateral framework. For example, Nepal and India, or Bangladesh and India, or even India and Sri Lanka under the bilateral trade agreement. And the third and final point is that it is often said, why just fixation with SAARC? What about BIMSTEC and BBIN? Fine, but BIMSTEC and BBIN will also require a crucial role in the form of Bangladesh's participation. And there, India-Bangladesh ties will become crucial for BIMSTEC and BBIN to deliver beyond or over and above what SAARC has given us. But India and Bangladesh ties have, over the last year or so, kind of nosedived. And I'm just trying to hope, or maybe because I am an optimist on the regional cooperation front, that the Trump's tariffs and the hint of Sino-Indian rapprochement also might in the days to come positively impact India-Bangladesh ties also, and thereby ties with all South Asian countries, whereby whether it's SAARC or BBIN or BIMSTEC can be moved forward. So that's my point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paras, for those very pointed suggestions. So I'm going to jump the queue a little bit because Mustafiz has to catch a flight in a few minutes. He has to leave. So Mustafiz, with your vast experience in the region, and especially do try to address some of the South Asia related questions that Sarah and Prabir and others have asked in your responses.
Thank you, Sanjay. But before I come to that, the first question was with regard to Mr. Trump and what happens when he is not there. I think that, you see, even if these reciprocal tariffs are there in place for the next 3 and 3.5 years, people will shift their orders, investments will restructure themselves, and the damage will be done. So that's the danger I see. So it's just not that we just wait and see for 3 years and then maybe things will improve. So we have to keep that in mind. I remember that during Trump 1.0, when he imposed tariffs on China, Mr. Biden continued those. Okay, so one can never be sure. So I think our homework we will have to do. And with regards to also WTO, the dispute settlement body, which used to be called the jewel in the crown, that has been dysfunctional. But at the same time, European Union and others have put in place a second tier of dispute settlement on mutual agreement basis. I think that the BRICS countries can also, think about innovatively in the current dispensation, in order to, even within the WTO, have rules and plurilateral rules which we can abide by. With regard to Prabir's important observation, yes, I think that it's a world of variable geometry, as we call in WTO. So I think it's BIMSTEC is one window. But at the end of the day, I think from Pakistan there was a comment that whether this common panic can unite us in South Asia. So I think that I heard when I read Che Guevara that nothing unites people than common panic. So now maybe a time that we should demonstrate that willingness to get together and remove, as rightly was mentioned, with regard to para-tariffs and non-tariff barriers. I think that can be a good way to go forward. With regard to depreciation, I don't know, it has the other side, imported inflation, Bangladesh currency, the Bangladesh taka depreciated by 35% over the last 2 years. For us, it's a no-go area going forward to increase our competitiveness because of its implications on imported inflation. So I think that that what we will have to do is to have regional and sub-regional cooperation, value chains, and increasing our productivity in order to remain competitive in the global market. So that will be my comment. And TG, very sorry if I have misspelled your name. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mustafiz. Safe flight. What TG wouldn't mind is in good company, illustrious TN Srinivasan. I don't think he will mind.
Okay.
Safe travels. Thank you so much for coming on board. So let me now turn to Subhashini. In addition to the questions that have been asked, generally, there is a pointed question for you online. Kumutini Sivatas asks, is Sri Lanka negotiating any FTAs of the Asia-Pacific region? Is there any hope for Sri Lanka to do that? We all know it's a very reluctant partner in FTAs, but over to you.
Yes, so I'll start with that. Actually, I do not see with the new government any appetite for trade agreements so far. Previous government had a long list of trade agreements with especially ASEAN countries, but I do not see that same level of interest and engagement in the free trade agreements from the current administration, not so far. The other question I thought maybe, since others didn't touch on it, on the WTO, I just have a slightly different view. So a lot of people feel that WTO is dysfunctional because the appellate body is dysfunctional. But in my view, I look at World Trade Organization as a platform where countries in the world can get together and discuss and deliberate on issues of common interest and try to find more multilateral solutions that address each other's concerns than trying to engage bilaterally. So I feel that this kind of forum, the platform value of WTO, has not been sufficiently recognized, and it is disheartening that none of the major players from EU, Japan, South Korea to India not giving leadership to bring this kind of discussion and dialogue to see United States does have many valid concerns as well, although the response is out of proportion and may not be even addressing the core problems. But we need to see whether there can be a multilateral deliberation discussion in an amicable manner among the countries to see, is there a better path forward for this for us than the current bilateral approach that everyone seems to be taking. So that's my view of WTO. On SARC, I'm a SARC skeptic. So I feel the relationships between countries have deteriorated, and I do not really see them as being able to come together. And at the end of the day, it all depends actually on India as well. I think every country looks up to India for leadership. And whether India can bring that leadership to bring together everybody within the current context of security concerns, geopolitical tensions, and everything else, I do not have a lot of hope for SARC. On diversification for smaller economies like Sri Lanka, I think there was a question about, can we diversify? To me, diversification does not mean you stop exporting to United States. To me, you can even increase exports to United States, right? It's not about forgetting the US market. It's about making sure that you actually also have other markets that you export to. You're not exclusively reliant on US market, right? That's my point one. Second point is, for smaller countries like Sri Lanka, diversification from apparel is not a choice but a necessity, because Sri Lanka is increasingly becoming uncompetitive in the region for apparel, where you're surrounded by large countries with large low-cost pools of labor, like 10 times more than what Sri Lanka has, and Sri Lanka cannot be competitive in this sector. It's not a choice, it's a necessity. So it's very important for Sri Lanka to find where our comparative advantages is and work on those sectors. So I'll end there, Sanjay.
Thank you so much, Subhashini, for, I think you're all great points, but in particular, I want to just bring up the WTO issue as a platform. I think that would be a nice way to use, and it is. We have talks going on all the time in different kinds of forums, different kinds of discussions. It's actually an underappreciated part of WTO. So thank you for pointing that out. So last but certainly not the least, let's turn to Vaqar to come back and answer any questions you feel like, and also raising any issues. And also, there's a lot of the thing about the eastern part of South Asia, right? So how do you feel Pakistan can become more, included in any strategy or discussions in the light of this ongoing tariff turmoil?
Thank you, Sanjay. So, of course, agree with a lot of what has been said in the response by esteemed panelists. I think our sort of embracing a new national tariff policy was kind of a response to view the new post-Trump era as something that could be of permanence. So we were not looking at just saying that that Trump years would be around for maybe 3.5 more years, but actually looking at a bigger wave, which many were expecting, given that there were some European governments as well talking in very protectionist terms. So when we sat with the government, our view was to really look at this in have a longer term lens to this challenge. Second, I think I agree with Dr. Prabir there. The challenge for our economies is going to be that we can diversify overnight. So this is the export basket in the short to medium term that we have to deal with. And if we can create additional complementarities across our economies or economies being affected by tariff, that would be a low-hanging fruit. In case of SAARC, of course, I have remained an optimist. I think even in those years where, for example, SAARC was allowed to maybe or relationships were allowed to operate at a minimal level, and there were trade flows across intra-region. You can see the numbers speak for themselves. So even the minimal effort on SAARC can deliver trade gains, and that's what data says, not something that I'm saying. And until the time we do so, the MNCs sitting in our countries continue to gain. It's our own local producers, manufacturers, supply chain vendors who are the losers, basically. Many of the small businesses are the losers. I think on FTAs, yes, theoretically, fully agreed. We advocate for more liberal approach to FTA. We've been advocating for bringing SAFTA back on track as well. FTA with US, EU, Pakistan FTA has been discussed so many times. But I think it's our own business community on the ground as well, which has to be taken into confidence. Many of them felt that sort of opening up too soon, too quickly could be detrimental for them. So they've taken a conservative view of things. So politically speaking, they have to be taken on board. Last point on whether panic can bring trade relations, whether panic can deepen trade relations or not. I think for many of the economies, they are still not viewing this as panic. So I can talk about Islamabad, for example, given that we are a small open economy, didn't have much exposure, a very large exposure like maybe India or several other economies to international trade. So we were late in our understanding of what could be the repercussions. Then, of course, there was a trade deal, and we realized that we relatively fared well than other countries in case of our negotiations in DC. So the intensity or the perception of that panic went down. So let's not wait for panic to deepen trade relations. This should be something which should be a continuous process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vaqar. So I think it's we've had a very, very lively and very wonderful and illuminating session. I will very quickly make a few points, not to necessarily sum up, but just to kind of highlight and add my own perspective. Couple of points about the questions, and the Rohini's question about the FTAs. I agree with TG. I think there is the interest on the horizontal side from India. You know, more and more FTAs. If you want to go deep into particular ones, I think the UK FTA has been the deepest, as you know, India has signed. And in fact, some people are concerned about the depth of it. But I mean, that's the way to go, you know, with ASEAN, with Japan, with, you know, and be more ambitious. I think that is the way from an Indian point. And to Shishir's point about, you know, will this be reversed? And I kind of also agree with TG. There's a hysteresis, and you know, things don't change once things, you get used to tariff revenue, for example. That's a lot of money coming in every month. You know, they're saying $360 billion a year, just minimal with the current tariff. So you know, you kind of get used to it because there is a problem about other domestic taxation. So there is some extent, some offset, not the whole thing. So I think you know, policies that are economists would call suboptimal don't necessarily have a habit of going away. People get used to those kinds of policies because of the political economy behind them. So now a few final thoughts. South Asia as a platform, getting together, possibilities, we've all talked about it, the whole panel and myself, the value chain possibilities we all know, and they're there and in product after product. The question is, and as some of the questions also raised, the issue is, can trade go ahead despite political issues between countries? And you don't have to look further than India for that. India-China trade is its highest or second highest partnership, probably be the highest given now what is happening with the US. It will probably become the highest partnership for India. It was one or two, but by far the largest source, by far and away, the largest source of imports for India. So if India-China trade can boom and thrive, and you know how India looks at China, so in that case, why not? Why can't the rest of South Asia follow that same example and allow trade to kind of go ahead and take the lead and keep it different? Trade, in fact, provides the opportunity to discuss other issues because, that's the whole argument of trade and peace. People highlighted own reforms. There's no question about it. You can't take advantage of opportunities unless your costs are competitive and so on. So there's every country, I think, is to some extent, India has been quite energetic about unleashing and setting up reform committees and so on and unleashing GST reforms. A very important point made, don't crow about others' misery, right? You never know when it's going to hit you, right? And this misery is universal. It's because there is going to be some substitution away because of the demand effect. So there's going to be an impact on the rest of the world, on the whole world, the global economy. Uncertainty, as I said, that is universal. It's not just, it's economic uncertainty for the globe. So, and things can change. We know that in this dispensation, things can change on a tweet. So let's not, I think that point is very well taken by, mentioned by Subhashini. Then the Asia pivot is very clear. I think for long, South Asia has been completely underrepresented in value chains, global value chains, and who's the leader there? It's Asia. So by deepening relations, economic relations with Asia, South Asia will definitely gain and become part of that. And so that's part of the diversification process. One thing that I want to say about South Asia country, which Indians may not appreciate, India may not, is the complete lack of product diversification in South Asia, in the rest of South Asia, right? There's such a heavy reliance, as Subhashini said, Vaqar said, it's country after country. Bangladesh is unprecedented in its garments forming a single product. 85% of its overall merchandise exports come from one product, if broadly speaking, garments, right? So that's unprecedented concentration, right? So product diversification is very important, and there India has a huge major role to play. As you know, in my earlier hat, in my other life when I was in the World Bank, we wrote a book on regional investment in South Asia, right? So there's a lot what India can do to play that role of product diversification in the region. I loved Vaqar's suggestion about expert recommendations. Let's take that up offline, Vaqar and others who've already here, and see whether we can do something about that. And then finally, I want to say about the point about Subhashini's point about forums to strengthen the multilateral system, if not the plurilateral system. You can have agreements with the majority of countries or a large number of countries, which can then create that dynamic for preserving the rules-based trade order. So I finally want to end by thanking my panelists, all of you who without hesitation accepted my invitation on behalf of CSEP and our, using our Sentinel hat as well, TG and myself. So thank you once again. Stay well. Nepal, be strong and hope for peace very quickly. And thanks once again to our esteemed panel. And we'll be, I dare say, talking to each other soon again, once again. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Vaqar. Good to see you.
Good to see you. It was a very good session.